Hello, and welcome to the Guns on Pegs podcast. I am George Browne. His name is Chris Horne. Say hello, Chris.
Hello, George. How are we doing?
Yeah, very well, thank you. If it's not too long since we saw each other.
We've been sitting in the car for about 8 hours together, haven't we?
We have, yes. Do you want to say why?
We've been shooting, obviously. We decided to travel to Wales and go and have some fun because that's what you do at the end of January.
Yes. Well, I've got to say, like, it's obviously something that you've shot in that part of the world a fair bit before, but it's the first time I've experienced, what you'd call high bird shooting. Was anything that we saw yesterday extreme? Does it count as extreme?
Okay, yeah, a few of them were. Do you know what I loved? So we were at Old Long Mountain. What I loved about that shoot is that they were just constantly really good birds. Like, they weren't sort of like some of the Welsh shoots where they're all just out of range. And I find that demoralizing. But they weren't. They just had it was a really good shoot. I enjoyed that. And I like you say, if you're used to shooting partridge land in Hampshire, Wales has proper mountains, doesn't it?
Certainly hilly, yes. Demoralised is an interesting word. I don't think I was ever quite demoralised because I didn't really expect to hit anything. So when I did, it came as a very nice surprise. But I was chatting to someone this morning about it, and they said, what was the ratio? And I said, well, the team's ratio was about 6-1. And then they said quite insightfully, and what about your ratio? And I said, well, yes, it was a multiple of that.
6-1. I mean, that's quite a lot of missing, isn't it? But I think that's a nice little spot for a really, like, if you're on a high bird day, I think any more than that. And there are lots of shoots where people shoot consistently worse than that. And that's where I sort of start to lose it. But
a lovely part of the world and very nicely done, I thought.
Yeah, it was very good. Worth it.
Very much worth it. I had a lovely time. But enough about our jollies and japes. Why don't you tell everyone who our guest is today?
Absolutely. Our guest today, gosh, he's got a good bio. I like this one. He was in the Coldstream Guards to start with. Well, obviously after lots of things, but that was first major moment. He's a farmer. He's an author. He's written 2 books that Guns on Pegs podcast listeners are most likely to have come across. They are Red Rag to a Bull and its sequel, Land of Milk and Honey, which tell how he arrived home from military duties to take over the family estate, Arbigland, which is up in the borders. He's a political activist, I think probably a right term. We'll come back to that in a minute. He's a columnist for the likes of Daily Telegraph, Country Life, and of course he's a Scribehounder. A lot of you will know him from that platform. So a massive warm welcome. Please put down your gun cleaning rods and put your hands together for Jamie Blackett.
Hello, Chris and George and the listeners. Thanks for having me on.
Good to have you with us.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you with us, Jamie.
Your political activist statement, are you happy? You okay with that one?
I guess so, yeah. I mean, that's a sort of catch-all, isn't it? I think a lot of journalists are also, politically active. I did stand for the Scottish Parliament at one point, unsuccessfully, but I think we made our point about Nicola Sturgeon and the way things were going in Scotland. And I do what I can. I mean, I sort of fell into writing slightly almost by mistake, really. And it gave me a platform to write about the things I care about. And as I've written on Scribehounder, the countryside is in a bit of a bad place at the moment in some ways. And so it's good to be able to defend it and to be given a platform to defend it in the Daily Telegraph and other places.
I imagine that whole period of that bit. I mean, as you say, you've touched upon. We'll get back onto Scottish politics later because it is tricky, and it's certainly different to where we are at the moment. But that challenge you sort of set yourself, I imagine you didn't expect to get huge gains, but it was a case of making a point in terms of what you were doing because of the way that things are changing so much.
Yeah, well, I mean, I wrote about that a lot in Land of Milk and Honey, which was a sort of ironical title for the way things are in Scotland at the moment. Partly. It was also about growing milk and honey. But, well, as you say, we'll come back to it. But, it was up until that point, there weren't many people standing up to the SNP. I like to think we sort of changed the game a little bit.
Very good. Someone needs to.
Indeed. Well, so at the risk of getting off on a very serious footing, I think we'd better bring things back down to earth with a bit of a bump. The way we like to start these things off, Jamie, is by having a bit of a drink. Now, the way this would normally go is I would ask you, what's that you're drinking? So let's do that. What have you got in your glass?
Well, I'm just going to pour it now, actually. My son makes rum. He had regimental ice bucket, obviously. So I'm going to start because although people probably think I'm a sort of high-functioning alcoholic or even a low-functioning one, drinking at 3:30 in the afternoon, I'm going to ease myself into it with this ready-to-drink can of lowland rum mixed with double Dutch, cucumber and watermelon, which actually is an ideal summer drink, but it's quite nice on a winter's afternoon as well.
So this isn't just your son making rum. This is a serious operation that is... I must declare, I have what you're drinking in front of me because Jamie has very kindly sent us both, George, these drinks. And Royal Mail in all its glory has... let you down.
It has quite badly. I'm feeling quite jealous.
So go on then. The backstory. So what's it called? And how did this come about?
Well, his business is called John Paul Jones Rum, and he and his business partner Finn. My son's got Oliver and Finn started this business during lockdown when they'd both lost their jobs and were holed up in their flat in London. And they started messing about with making rum, and they now have 4 brands. This is the ready-to-drink cocktail one. The others come in bottles. It's based on John Paul Jones was a local hero or anti-hero, depending on which way you look at it. He was born on this estate.
Was he?
In the mid-18th century, and went off to America and founded the American Navy during the American War of Independence. And he was the last person to actually invade Britain. So he was a bit of a traitor, really. If he was around today, he would definitely be in the SNP, I suspect.
But they liked him enough to put his name on the cross.
But I think because actually, irrespective of his politics, and I suppose most people have forgiven the Americans now for breaking away and becoming a superpower on their own rather than the British colony. He was the most amazing naval commander possibly that there's ever been, and he won numerous naval battles, not just against us Brits, but also against the Turks when he was the admiral of the Black Sea Fleet for Catherine the Great. So he's the most extraordinary man. And so very good brand for somebody who had a real sort of buccaneering spirit. And my son's now exporting it to America, where it won a gold medal at the big American booze trade fair. So hopefully it's going to be a big success story for British exports.
That's exciting.
It's very cool.
So he's doing well then. I mean, obviously that gold medal is great, but I mean, is it going better than he expected?
Yeah. Well, you know all about startups, and he's going pretty well. It's a
hell of a journey.
It's a hell of a journey he's on. Yeah. But yeah, I think it's going very well, and he's got some investors on board now who are very excited about it. It's being stocked in Fortnum & Masons and Daylesford and various places like that. So this one I'm drinking now, actually, it just slipped down very nicely on a January afternoon. I think of it more as something that you would drink on the riverbank in the summer as a sort of substitute for Pimm's. The others I've got here are definitely more winter drinks. They're a sort of substitute for malt whiskey, I suppose, really, that you would drink after shooting on a winter's afternoon. Not that people drink at tea after shoots so much anymore. In my youth, everybody did, but now things have become a little bit more serious.
So this ready-to-drink can of lowland rum mixed with double Dutch. What is double Dutch, by the way?
Double Dutch is the new sort of Fever Tree or Schweppes. I mean, they're a mixer company.
Right. Okay, brilliant. It's really fresh, isn't it? It's lovely. And what I'm surprised by is I didn't realise till I opened it, it says cucumber on it. And I really struggle to drink things with cucumber because I find they overpower everything. But it's lovely. I would be the first to say if it had cucumber in, I wouldn't be able to get on with it. But no, it's really good. And as you say, it's the sort of thing that you might expect to be more of a summery drink. I think that works really well now.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's 4 o'clock on a Friday, so there's not many things that don't work at 4 o'clock on a Friday. I love the brand name. That's so cool. And many people will remember that during lockdown, there was a bit of a craze for sea shanties. And I had 2 very small children. And in my quest to avoid nursery rhymes at all costs, I started singing sea shanties to my kids when they were very tiny. And one of them that I was singing was by the same guys who had the...
Are you going to do it now, George?
I'm not going to do it now. But it was called John Paul Jones as a Pirate.
Okay.
And it's a very rousing song. I get the feeling that whoever wrote the song didn't have quite the same view of him as you do, because they were rather less charitable about his exploits. But a very good song.
Well, they were scared of him. Yeah.
What are they called? The Longest Johns is the name of the band. I highly recommend people go and look it up. And yes, a very good piece of branding that I approve. And I'm just disappointed I haven't got a chance to drink it with you.
Well, hopefully they'll get their act together. It will arrive at some point, and you can drink it and enjoy it.
Yeah, well, I definitely will.
You just reminded me of that song that went huge at the end of lockdown. Is it Wellerman?
Yeah, same band.
Gets in your head big time. Good. So, but I have also the Lowland rum. I've also got lined up the Ranger rum to go with some tonic in a second. And then I'm going to have this darker Lowland rum. There we go, on some ice.
That's the Providence, I think that one's called. They're all named after his ships.
Oh, really? That's good.
And we're going to be fairly incoherent by the end of the podcast, aren't we? But yeah, I don't suppose that will matter.
That's par for the course. Par for the course.
Yeah. So, George, what are you drinking instead?
Well, I was given I was trying to think of something at quite short notice that would be sort of on a similar sort of level. And so what I've got is something, the most tropical sort of drink that I could find in the house. And at Christmas, I was given by a very good friend a bottle of orange gin, homemade orange gin. So think slow gin, but orange. And it's, I assume, made in broadly the same way. There's quite a lot of sediment, and since it's just been sitting on the side since Christmas, and it had settled right out, rather like a bottle of Orangina. And you have to give it a jolly good shake before pouring. But actually, it's very good. I was wondering whether it was going to be very sharp or very, very, very ginny, but it's sort of got the same level of sweetness as slow gin would do, but it tastes of orange, and it's very, very good. Very good indeed. It's got quite a colour to it, and it's sort of, it's not clear. It's very sort of thick, and that's all the sediment, but it's absolutely delicious.
I've never seen one of those.
Nor have I. I've never come across it before. I mean, you think you've seen them all, haven't you? But then something else comes along. There's another one that's a fruit liqueur. Can't remember the brand, but my mum absolutely loves it, which is a blood orange one. And then there's a few marmalade ones kicking about as well, marmalade gin. But this is the first, straight up orange one that I've come across.
Very good. Well, that will get you set to read out some listener correspondence.
Well, that is a very professional link, Chris. Very well done. So, Jamie, what we like to do now is Whose Bird Is It Anyway? It's where we ask people to send in their shooting dilemmas and their quandaries and their queries that they can't find a way out of and they need our help with. I keep all our correspondence anonymous to protect the guilty, and this one comes from somebody I have named King Edward.
No relation of Edward King of AYA Rizzini.
I hadn't thought of that, but no relation. Normally, I'm a bit more creative than that.
Maybe there's a potato link, potato clue there.
There might be.
I think if they're really guilty, you should start doing that. Just turn their first names and surnames around and just say, we've anonymised you.
Anyway, King Edward has written, not sure if it's been asked before or not, but where do you stand on tipping the keeper on your beaters day? I would always tip on a shoot day, but I beat on 2 shoots. On one, we get fed and watered extremely well, with a brilliant beaters day and a thank you meal. We always do a whip round for the keeper to say thank you. But on the other shoot, the keeper is miserable, never brings us even a bottle of port to share round on a cold day's beating, and on the beater's day we supply all our own food and drink. I feel that on this shoot I shouldn't tip the keeper, as beater's day is our day and should be his way of saying thanks to us for all the hard work we and our dogs do throughout the season. Am I right or wrong?
This is a great question, and he's
it's
right.
Good.
We've never, ever discussed tipping the keeper on Beaters Day. The beaters tipping the keeper. Oh, Jamie, over to you.
Well, I don't know. I don't think there's any hard and fast rule on this, is there? I mean, I think
No.
I mean, the keeper may well be shooting himself. Probably is on the beaters' day, and it's probably most of his mates that he's got there. We had our beaters' day actually a couple of days ago, and it was all the shoot helpers and beaters and one or two others that had just been invited along. And I don't think there's any necessity necessarily under those circumstances for the keeper to be tipped, or that he would expect to be. But maybe it might be a nice touch. People have had a good season. I mean, it depends very much on the shoot, I guess, doesn't it? Really, I mean, some shoots like ours, where there are our shoot helpers have boundary days and things through the season, and but we don't actually have a keeper. We do it all with volunteers anyway, so it wouldn't really apply.
So, but you've touched upon something there, in that the term Beaters' Day is a bit of a catch-all for sort of informal days at the end of the season, because sometimes they are keepers' days, like you say, where the keeper invites mates and chooses who he wants to shoot. And sometimes they are very much for the beaters, and the keeper will still be in the line, not the gun line, sorry, in the beating line. And then other times they're sort of shoot owner host days where they just fight along a bunch of people who've sort of been involved throughout the year. I've been invited on a few of those over the years, where we just sort of, one that maybe has done very well out of Guns on Pegs and just rings us up and says, "Would you like to come along?" Actually, Whitfield did that once.
Oh, I was shooting there on Monday.
Lovely. It was
Saturday. No, not Monday. Saturday. Last Saturday I was shooting.
It's difficult when you shoot every day, isn't it, to remember which one?
I wish.
The Beaters' Day at Whitfield a few years ago was it's the only time I've ever been 400 out in a sweepstake.
Yeah.
Too high or too low?
Too low.
Yeah, I can imagine. We certainly left them a few.
Fair enough.
But I mean, this question of, it sounds to me like tipping is always discretionary. And, if you think that this keeper on the second shoot is a bit of a dick, then don't tip him. You should never feel that you're compelled to tip if you don't think that a tip is warranted, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, it's pretty... I have once seen a gun not tip a keeper because he just felt that he wasn't doing his job properly. But it's pretty rare, isn't it? I think it's sort of expected, really. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it is entirely discretionary. And
I think he is leading towards that with what he said. Tipping... I think expecting the beaters to tip the keeper generally to the same level is not... I don't think that would be expected. No. On the basis that you don't do beating for the money, you do it more for the fun, but it's nice to have a little bit of reward for it. But the tip is likely to be more than the beater's pay would be for that day.
Well, I mean, the beater's day is sort of in itself a tip, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so the idea of tipping because you received a tip, it's slightly odd, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think it's. Yeah, I know. I think also it's on a lot of shoots. I think there would be a bit of awkwardness about money changing hands under those circumstances. I think gone are the days on a lot of shoots where there's a sort of formal distinction between a keeper and beaters and guns and everybody. I think
quite so.
A lot of shoots, everybody sort of mucks in together a lot more now, don't they? Really.
But where he said this, the keeper that he likes is brings stuff along. Is always basically good fun. I think maybe it's a chance to bring along sort of your concoction of slow gin as the tip type thing.
Yeah.
Those sorts of things for the keeper.
John Paul Jones rum.
Exactly. So that money's not the thing. It's just here's a little whatever that each person comes up with, or even a contribution towards the day. That's maybe expected. I don't know. Not financially. I'm meaning like something to make it go better.
Yeah. So I think we're on the side of this guy generally. Don't tip him if you don't want to, but we're a little less certain about tipping on Beaters' Day in general.
Yes.
And that maybe it's not really the thing.
I wouldn't have thought it was. A bit of a grey area, though.
Yeah, I think yeah. There's a lot of, I'm not sure when this pod goes out, but we probably just missed Beaters' Day. So lots of people probably listening to this will be thinking, crap, that solves what I should have done in that scenario yesterday or whatever it is.
Yes, it will go out after the event, I think. It goes out on Tuesday, which is, there's still a couple of days left. There might be a couple more Beaters' Days being squeaked in, I think.
Okay.
Yes, very good. Right, Chris, unpopular opinions, please.
From someone that you have called Anna. King Edward?
Well, it's a bit of a tricky one because I'm a bit worried that if I give you the reason, I will slightly give the game away. But yes, Jamie was correct when he said that there's a potato connection. And that's, I think, as far as I'm prepared to go.
Okay. I'm none the wiser.
No, that's the point.
Right. So we've got an unpopular opinion from someone that George has called Anna, who says, why are you beating in tweed breeks if you aren't a gamekeeper or in the gun line? Most of us that shoot love the sense of tradition that goes with it. The tweed, the socks and the garters, the 11s tipple, the strange looks you get at the petrol station. The continuing popularity of shooting brings in new ideas to challenge these traditions. New, lighter, more waterproof and quicker drying fabrics have been invented that don't hold on to the musty odour of the back of your cupboard when they've been stored since the end of January. So why do people who aren't gatekeepers insist on wearing tweed breeks to go beating? Generally, if you're beating, you'll be snagged in brambles, climbing barbed wire fences and getting drenched. It's anything but glamorous. And if you're not going through brambles, etc., you're probably going around them and avoiding the job you're there to do. I've been known to wear breeks if I'm on a beat one, stand one shoot, but these breeks are a £20 vinted bargain, bought for Beaters Day and Small Syndicates Day. If they get ripped or trash, I'm not going to be too concerned. I leave the handmade breeks at home for days when I know I'm stood solely on the peg. If you're going to wear tweed breeks from one of the top outfitters on a small syndicate shoot, don't complain to your host about the state of said breeks after you've been beating in them. Okay, that last line suggests everything where this has come from. Up until that point, I thought this was just genuinely an opinion. Someone has done something and complained when they've turned up beating in breeks, and this person has gone off on a rant.
I'm not going through there. I'll ruin my breeks.
Yes, that's what's happened. Changes everything I was thinking up until that point.
So what were you thinking up until that point, Chris?
Well, I think people do beat him. What the hell you want to beat in? But don't then complain because you know the score with beating.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jamie, do you agree?
Well, I don't know. I mean, unless you've transgendered Anna in anonymizing them, I think that it's a bit of a sort of, if I can put it this way, a little bit of a sort of girly obsession with clothes here. I don't think the blokes really mind too much what they wear, do they really? But and coming from Dumfriesshire, where it rains most of the time, most people would be wearing waterproof trousers on most days over whatever they've got underneath, which is probably going to be something tweed anyway, particularly if they're going to be going through kale or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it wouldn't occur to me really to wear after the sort of balmy days of the new sort of trend of shooting grouse in chinos.
What?
In August. After those days have gone.
Hold on. This is not a trend I've seen yet.
Really?
Tweet. Yes.
Okay. No, well, there's some enlightened moor owners who tell you to turn up in chinos to shoot grouse when it's very hot in August and September.
I'm not sure how I feel about that.
Thereafter, it wouldn't occur to me to wear anything other than +4s, either for shooting or beating, because I mean, you know, they're designed to withstand the weather and thick thorns and all the rest of it.
Yeah,
I think part of the problem is that these days a lot of the +4s that you see advertised or buy off the peg, because they're increasingly there are lots of them you can buy off the peg, are made out of very thin tweed that you wouldn't have seen years ago. Everybody had very thick, hairy sort of tweed.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, they should be sort of near enough bulletproof, really.
Yeah, I guess that sort of tweed is a lot less practical. If your correspondent has whichever chromosome it is as the female ones, then I guess they might have that very lightweight sort of tweed bought through its aesthetic appeal rather than for its practicality. So that could put them in a bit of a quandary, perhaps.
We don't know the gender of the person that's definitely complained, and that's what's caused Anna to write in. So it's hard to say, but
I have little. I would be perfectly happy for somebody to wear breeks beating, and I have done myself. And as Jamie says, they are eminently practical for it. They're good for going up and down hills and getting over gates and all the sort of things that you have to do when you're beating. But I do have a problem with people complaining about them getting ripped, because rather like a dress shirt is inevitably going to get red wine on it, breeks are inevitably going to get ripped at some point. That's just par for the course. At some point, you're going to get hung up on a barbed wire fence, whether you're a gun or a beater. You're going to get snagged on a thorn or whatever. Something is going to happen, and your breeks will be gone for the. But I almost feel like they're not proper breeks until they've been repaired once.
Yeah.
So, the more holes, the better, really.
So she's kind of saying, don't wear breeks beating. I do really disagree with that. I encourage the breeks on any roll on the shoot day. But as you say, just make sure that if you do, you know what you're in for. You're prepared. But at the same time, if you are slightly bothered and breeks are pricey versus other garments, actually, they're really not when you think about it. I was about to say, like the Sealand and Harkina trousers, which are sort of, staples.
£1,000, yeah.
They're not cheap, are they? But they are bulletproof.
No. Yeah.
So that's the thing. Maybe they'll last for years through all the brambles, but there's a fair outlay to get them.
So I think that's fairly unanimous. I think this is an unpopular opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, Anna.
But I'm with her on the complaining. Because there's definitely two opinions in here.
Yeah, very good point. Very good point.
Yeah.
Okay, finally, we have got a Forgotten Drive submission. So, Jamie, we've been talking for a long time about drives that no longer exist for whatever reason and asking people to reminisce. And I don't keep these ones anonymous because I don't feel that anybody needs to be. So this one comes from Jack. And Jack has written, "Gentlemen, my contribution to your segment for the pod is not so much a forgotten drive, but more appropriately, lost drives. I'm lucky enough to play a major part in the running of the shoot which my grandfather set up in the mid-70s and is continued by my father to the present day. We still have a strong number of the team who were present at the shoot's inception, running 15 or so days per season. Until the mid-2000s, the shoot included a 250-acre factory site. Surrounded on three sides by the backwaters, this island is a maze of marshland, reed beds, water meadows, blackthorn, brackish sinkholes and dikes, willow and poplar belts and oak woods with a thick bracken floor. The area provided rich habitat for a wide variety of game and waterfowl. Double digits of winged species in the bag were regularly achieved. Alas, with tightening health and safety regulations on the site, drives such as Timbuk 2, Timbuk 3, Water Tower, Car Park, Silver Willows and Main Factory have been consigned to the history books. One of the most characterful of these lost drives was certainly the Water Tower. The guns would line out behind a belt with a 50-foot wrought iron water tower at one end. The drive consisted of an 8-acre reed bed riddled with brackish sinkholes and hidden ditches that could submerge an unwary beater as they waded through the head-high reeds and blackthorn. A raised track halfway through gave the opportunity for a head count to ensure no one was left behind. Despite the hardship for the beaters, the guns were in a species bag utopia. The usuals, pheasants, partridges, pigeons, woodcock and snipe were regularly bagged, but it was not uncommon for teal, mallard, coots, moorhens, golden plover and more to be in the bag as they climbed over the belt. At the end of the drive, laughs and jokes were had as someone would empty their welly of the stinking water and dogs would reappear a different shade from when they entered. On one of the last days on Main Factory, my father only wanted to stand to have a go for a woodcock. As the opportunity began to present itself, and as my father raised his gun, an overly keen stop waved his flag and promptly sent the woodcock hurtling off in the other direction. The stop was jokingly presented his P45 at that evening's beaters' meal. Unfortunately, I can't describe every tale, but 20 years on, these tales of the lost factory drives are regaled amongst the young and old members of our shoot with much nostalgia, whilst we continue to come together to run the rest of the shoot. It brings regular guns and beaters together, and it symbolises to me what's so important about these days, a shared experience and common ground between the young and the old, experienced and inexperienced, the wealthy and the not so. A community is created by game shooting unlike any other, and its value to physical and mental well-being is immeasurable. I hope this has provided a fun picture in one's mind for you and the listeners, and whilst these lost drives might be unique, I hope it's evoked fond memories of your own bygone times of your own shooting adventures. Go well, Jack.
Lovely.
Great.
Very good, isn't it?
He hasn't mentioned why Did he mention why it was lost?
Yes, health and safety. This old factory site. Yeah.
Health and safety. I like the idea that you might lose beaters halfway through the drive. It's that sort of...
It sounds like an amazing bit of ground.
All too common. I mean, I'm a bit older than you guys, but I mean, looking back through my game book from sort of even just sort of 20 years ago, hell of a lot of shoots. I mean, I can think of about 10 just in this county alone where I used to shoot regularly that no longer going for whatever reason. And I think that, a friend of mine wrote a book recently called The Lost Race Courses of Britain, about all the race courses that no longer exist, and maybe there's a market for the lost shoots of Britain.
That would be very interesting. It's interesting that there's a crossover between what you've just said. We have a drive here on the farm called Gallops because there used to be a training Gallops on that bit of the farm, and I'm pretty certain that a Grand National winner was trained there. And now I can't remember the name of the horse, which is annoying. But one of the things that really stood out for me in this is the names of the drives, which is, as you know, Chris, something I've had a bee in my bonnet about for quite a long time.
I love drive names.
I would love to know the story behind Timbuk 2 and Timbuk 3.
But that Timbuk 3 is the perfect shoot drive name.
Yeah.
You know exactly how that came about. It was a spare moment when someone was trying to explain where the next bit was, and
I reckon, Timbuk 2 is really far away, and Timbuk 3 is a bit further away.
Yeah, I would guess that's probably it. Yeah.
So I would like to propose a new feature, Chris.
Yeah,
which is, rather than forgotten drives, your favourite drive name and the story behind the name of that drive.
I like that. I love that. It needs the story. It needs the story because often you've got a cracking drive name you can think of, but no one really knows the story.
Good.
Go on, off the top of your head, yours.
Ooh. Well, so I've mentioned Gallops, which isn't terribly exciting, but it does tell the history of the place a bit. We've got one called Adley Dell, and I'm not entirely clear who Adley was or why he has a dell named after him. And Dell's a bit of a strong term. It should really be called Adley's Depression or something like that. Certainly, given how the drive went this year. But most of ours are just fairly descriptive or borrow the field name or something like that. We do have a field name. We've got two interesting ones. One, Dead Well, which is reportedly where someone fell down a well. We have Gun Site, where they had anti-aircraft guns during the war. And we've also got Three Maids Hill, which is where reportedly three young ladies were buried up to their necks accused of witchcraft. So there's always stories.
You've done rather well in regard to the new feature there. I mean, Three Maids Hill, that's a story. It's still called that.
Yes, although I've not been able to find any written record of it anywhere. If you Google it, you just get the name of the roundabout.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Jamie, have you got any that come to mind?
Well, yeah. Actually, the ones here, we haven't got any particularly spectacular names, but there's one place I shoot where there's one called the Old Woman's Garden, which conjures up all sorts of images. But I think the probably the cottage that they went with the garden is now a ruin. But one imagined that at one stage they went through her garden to beating out the pheasants, probably in Edwardian times or something. I shot somewhere the other day. There was a drive called Dead Pole because they found a dead body in there a few years ago who happened to be a poor old Polish guy who'd wandered into the wood and had a heart attack or something.
Oh, God.
It's a bit macabre. Yeah, it'll come to me. I'm sure there are. I mean, I suppose what's a bit of a pity in some ways is the sort of commercialization of shooting, which in many ways has been a good thing. But it's sort of, there's now a sort of pressure to have sort of, it's become a bit like golf. You have signature drives with rather like signature holes, and people tend to call drives by sort of silly names to
yes
sort of emphasize how high they are, sort of north face of the Eiger or Everest or something like that, which I suppose is rather a shame in some ways because there are some lovely old, rather like field names. It's all part of local history, isn't it?
I agree.
They tend to get lost, a bit like renaming pubs.
So something slightly outspoken here, not for the first time. I think any drive that is named after the intended feeling of the shoot owner on the guns should be banned.
Yeah.
So any drive that's called like exasperation or something stupid like that, that really annoys me.
Yeah, well,
that's what you're getting at, isn't it?
Yes,
Yeah,
I am a bit.
honestly.
I am a bit. Although, I mean, actually, you looked at from the other end of the telescope. I've got a great friend where I shoot have shot pretty much every year for the last 20 or 30 years. And one of the drives is always called the blank drive.
And it's the busiest drive on the shoot.
Well, no, I have known it blank, but not very often.
We used to do. One of my best mates is. They've actually, their parents have now sold it, but they had their little farm in Norfolk, and we would walk around the farm just getting all sorts of species. And there was one patch of the farm with a small sort of a very small wood in it, and we called it Thousand Bird Wood because occasionally we'd get one out of it.
Yeah,
and so every time we went up there, we'd be like, and new people who hadn't done it before. Oh, well, we're going to Thousand Bird Wood in a minute, and they were getting
I think
excited.
Already is good. I think.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. Right, so King Edward and Anna and Jack and you, Jamie, are the newest members of the most noble order of the Garters and will very soon be in receipt of a set of the much coveted Guns on Pegs podcast shooting sock garters.
Oh, wow.
If you have got a shooting confession, quandary, or a query that you'd like us and our guests to help you with, or if you'd like to share an unpopular opinion, or if you'd like to tell us about a drive with a very good name, and you would like a set of garters, drop us an email to pod@gunsonpegs.com.
Good. Well, they'll be very welcome because I was looking at my garters the other day, and the moth have sort of pretty much had them.
Oh, really?
So
these are quite loud.
Good. Yeah. Happy with loud garters.
So, Jamie, you've talked a little bit about your shoot at home. Can you tell us a little bit more about it? I think you run it just for friends and family and that sort of thing. Is that right?
I do, really. I mean, the shoot has been a sort of barometer, really, of my finances and general well-being over the last 25 years or so. I mean, when I was growing up, my father ran it very much on sort of traditional lines, as everybody, well, not everybody, but as a lot of people did in those days. You know, we had a full-time keeper and lots of days, and it was all pretty much kept private, and then gradually we started letting a few days to help meet sort of rising costs, and then I took over with really no money in the bank at all, and so we then took the decision to go commercial and really let it to a shoot operator as a way of keeping our keeper in a job until he retired, and I used to get a couple of days back. And
how was that period for you? That's obviously a big change from what it was. That must have been quite a sort of weird thing to go through.
It was a bit. And I didn't, to be honest, I didn't really like the sort of cultural shift very, very much, really. But it was the right thing to do to keep somebody in a job and just to keep things going.
Was it nice to have a couple of days where you didn't have any sort of involvement? You just sort of turned up in your own shoot, a couple of decent days, and
yeah. On the other hand, that's yes. I mean, yes and no. I mean, actually, felt a bit awkward, really, having sort of being sort of in control but not in control, if you see what I mean.
Oh, true. Yeah.
To be honest, it became a bit tiresome with having lots of days going on around us and a lot of disturbance. Probably wasn't very good for the wildlife or anything like that. So anyway, then that all came to an end, and so then I didn't do anything really for a few years. We just used to have a bit of rough shooting and shoot the odd snipe and the odd pheasant, the very occasional pheasant and pigeons and that sort of thing. And then I've just sort of gradually in the last few years just been building it up again to the point where we're probably shooting sort of between 70 and 170, and well, I think our best day was 94 this year, between 70 and 100 on about 6 days a year, and doing it all with volunteers, and that's very satisfying in itself, really, and everybody gets a lot of satisfaction out of it.
Absolutely.
I try to look at everything that we do on the estate on a sort of spectrum from regenerative to degenerative, and I think that there were times when we were really doing a lot of shooting and perhaps putting down rather too many birds, where I think it was a little bit degenerative for our sort of ecosystem here. But I think what we're doing now is positive.
That's a fascinating point that you look at it like that, because I wonder how many do. And it is a really important way to look at it. And I think the most crucial part you said there is for your ecosystem. because every bit of land is so different, isn't it? And what one shoot can take is a lot more than another shoot, and so on. Do you think that the shoot? I mean, I don't know how big it was, but in terms of sort of GWCT guidelines, I don't know how familiar you are with those either. But like, do you think it was sort of really overdoing it, or was it?
Oh, I think we were probably, sort of within guidelines things, but it was. I mean, we were sort of shooting sort of 150, 200 birds, but on really quite a lot of days, and I think we possibly were putting down too many. I mean, certainly when we stopped, for example, we'd had quite a large buzzard population. Probably fed on quite a lot of poults initially, but then birds that hadn't been picked or whatever later on in the season, whatever, and and that just went back down to sort of normal levels afterwards. And now we have a few buzzards around, but they're not really an issue.
And what is the ground like, Jamie? What's the terrain and the makeup of the estate?
Well, it's coastal. It's quite low lying. I think the highest point is 150 feet above sea level or something. But we've got sort of undulating. It's basically sort of two valleys, really, with a sort of hog's back in the middle, close to the sea. So we've got a couple of cliff drives where we stand some of the guns on the beach.
Oh, wow.
We've got quite a lot of snipe bogs, just sort of marshy areas close to the sea or along the side of a burn. And then and most of the woodland now is sort of deciduous woodland. We're trying to get rid of all the spruce and that sort of thing, beech and oak, which is sort of what the pheasants like, which is, I mean, down in Hampshire you've got a lot of that, but up here it's comparatively rare, really. Most shooting is in coniferous woodland. Yeah, so it's a sort of typical sort of low ground shoot, really.
And you're a big hunting man as well. Do you hunt over the land there?
We do hunt here, but it's increasingly hard with the new law. We have the kennels here. I rarely get on a horse these days myself. I think my back is pretty much jiggered, really. But I enjoy my hunting. But sadly, I mean, the law in Scotland has really made it very difficult. We can only use 2 hounds at the moment.
So that came in 3 months ago.
It came in at the worst possible time because we just started and hounds were really starting to get sort of fired up and were going really well. And then they brought in this virtual ban, really, saying we could only take 2 hounds out at any one time. So it was a bit like, I mean, our huntsman George said that it's a bit like a university where you got to the end of Freshers Week and said, right, that's it now. We're in lockdown now. No more parties. And these poor old hounds went, ballistic, sort of locked up in kennels and hardly going out. So it caused a real problem, actually.
What's the score with the hounds then now? What's your plan?
Well, we're having to reduce the numbers, and we're hoping to get licenses to be able to carry on doing what we were doing, which was using a reasonable pack of, sort of up to 14 couple of hounds to flush foxes out of woodland to guns. But that may or may not be possible. I don't know. We're applying for licenses. We'll see what the civil servants serve up.
Have there been licenses given to others so far?
I think there have been something like 2 given out in the whole of Scotland so far.
That's to be expected, isn't it? Yeah.
And so it's very, very difficult. And our huntsman George and his partner Polly, I mean, they sadly are leaving to find pastures new because they, understandably they don't want to carry on under these circumstances, and that has a direct impact on the local economy. And they've got a child their son who was about to start at the village school and now won't be, and that the village school is in danger of closing because of the numbers, and that's one more young family driven out of the out of the Scottish countryside because of the prejudice of politicians.
And we talked a little bit earlier about your activities on Twitter and your activism, and when I hear you talking about it like that, it kind of makes a lot of sense why you would be so vocal. And I think it drives home how important activities like hunting, stalking, fishing, shooting are in, the more rural areas. I suppose, I shouldn't really say it, but I don't suppose that if shooting and fishing and hunting were banned and stalking rather were banned in Hampshire, it would actually have all that much of a negative impact on the local economy. There's a lot of other stuff going on here. But up in your neck of the woods, there's not quite so much, and the local communities in the villages and the shops and the schools and the pubs and all that sort of thing, they do rely on there being a permanent population, and they also rely on people coming in from outside to enjoy those things, don't they?
Yeah, completely. And what's ironic is that jobs are being destroyed the whole time by artificial intelligence. There are fewer petrol pump attendants, or hardly any now, and there won't be many checkout girls soon, or all these banks are closing the whole time, and all these jobs are being destroyed. But the jobs that can never be done by robots are huntsmen and keepers and stalkers and gillies. I mean, and these are ironically the jobs that we're losing at the moment, and they're not being replaced by wildlife rangers or anything like that, because those. There are those jobs, but I mean they're there anyway. They're not going to be necessarily any more of them by stopping hunting, shooting, and fishing is in danger of stopping anyway. So yeah, it's a real issue, and fortunately, we have a very, very good Scottish Gamekeepers Association who are, have a sort of authentic blue collar voice, which mine isn't, and they are listened to a little bit by the politicians, but. We've got this green coalition who really don't like the traditional way the countryside is managed with field sports and farming. They would prefer to see everything wilded and all the jobs go. They don't really care about them.
That's the last thing you said, isn't it? They just don't care. There's just not even a consider for the consequences, is there? It just, at all costs, we want it gone because that's our opinion. Is that the feeling?
Well, I think in some ways they quite like to make it worse. The worse things are, the more chance they have of bringing about the sort of revolution they want, and so they genuinely don't care, and a lot of things they're deliberately making worse, I think.
I wanted to ask you, Jamie, because I know that the way you run your farm is very considered, and we got hints of that with you talking about and the way you measure activity on the farm, regenerative and degenerative, I should say. Where do you stand on the concept of rewilding? What's your view?
I think it sort of kind of depends. I mean, there's a lot of misunderstanding about rewilding, and from a landowner's perspective, we've all been doing a lot of this stuff for years. Really, it's just we haven't really been calling it rewilding necessarily. And it's not a binary thing between farming and rewilding. There's a spectrum that we're all on, which has at one end possibly your friend King Edward, if he's a large arable farmer growing potatoes and cereals and things in a very intensive way, which we need if we're going to carry on feeding ourselves. And the other end of the spectrum, you've got somewhere like Knepp, where Charlie Burrell is doing great things, not by completely rewilding, but actually by farming on a very extensive basis with longhorn cattle and pigs and deer and Exmoor ponies, and and everybody's sort of on that spectrum, and it doesn't necessarily mean that all of your farm is on any particular one place on that spectrum. You have some bits that are farmed very intensively, and other bits that are effectively really almost rewilded. We've got patches of scrub and reed beds and lots of willows and that sort of thing, and some of our woodlands have been allowed to get very overgrown with fallen trees left lying and that sort of thing. Cattle now in some of our woods. So I'm all for a bit more of it.
Have you got bits around you being bought up for the rewilding that is kick everyone off and plant trees, or is that not?
Yeah, there's quite a lot of that going on. Yeah, and again the net effect is detrimental because the shepherd loses his job. There's a little bit of money changes hands with people actually planting the trees, but then you go away and leave them for 30 years and then go back and thin them if it's commercial forestry, and if it's just trees being planted just to on a sort of non-commercial basis, then there's even less work for them. So there's a real hollowing out at the moment, and we've seen this week in the Highlands they've taken a leaf out of the French book and got on their tractors and are starting to complain about the new clearances really that's happening.
I think with all this sort of worrying negativity, and not negativity on your part, but towards these communities, I was going to ask you, what is it that you think people should be doing? Because it feels like a bit of a tidal wave, as you say, because of their desire to achieve a certain amount of change. I mean, getting in your tractors and organising a very French-style rally is one thing you can do. What would be your message to others to sort of try and arrest this change?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it sort of depends, really. You know, I mean, we've embraced change here, and Brexit was a wake-up call for us. We weren't farming efficiently enough. We changed what we were doing. We brought in a New Zealand-style dairy, and that touchwood has worked really well, and we've created lots of jobs doing that, and but also done it in such a way that we've actually it's been better really for wildlife. Our bird counts have gone up a lot.
That's good to hear.
For others, you know, they're in a difficult place if their land isn't. I mean, we're at sea level here. If you're farming up in the hills, and you know, I think the government cynically. Both governments in Scotland and at Westminster, I think, cynically probably talk a good game about supporting farmers, but would quite like to see a lot less farmers. Really, I'm not sure they're really that bothered. And I think they feel that, you know, if a bit of disruption might be a good thing, it might drive less efficient farmers out, give others an opportunity perhaps to farm in a better way. But also that if lots of land goes out of production and is wilded or more trees or whatever, then that's going to help them meet these spurious net zero targets. I mean, I think, you know, a lot of people are in quite a bad place, and of course, you know, not most, but a lot of estates have got these traditional tenancies, which means that there simply isn't the flexibility to change. And you need to change to the new circumstances, but a lot of people simply can't do that, and the farms are too small probably to make a go of things. And you know, you've got the older generation probably keeping going at all costs because they've got their house is part of the tenancy. They might not be making any money, but they have a free roof over their heads. The younger generation maybe don't want to come back because they can see that it's not going to work. And so we're heading into a really sort of interesting and for many people a very upsetting and difficult time in farming at the moment.
But Jamie, before Christmas, you wrote a very powerful, I thought, piece on Scribehounder about what you think people can do, and maybe it's your military background coming through rather. I get the feeling that you want to take the fight to Westminster, to Holyrood, and not just lie back and be conquered, but to try and do something about it. Perhaps without repeating the entire thing, perhaps you can summarise for anybody who may not have read the article what you were saying in that piece.
Yeah, well, I was saying that people really need to engage in the battle of ideas that's going on at the moment. I mean, we've got a clearly defined opposition to us, people like George Monbiot and Chris Packham, who really do want to change the British countryside in a very profound way, and in some senses they are winning in the battle on the airwaves. They get a lot of airtime on the BBC. They've got their Guardian columns and so on, and you know, unless people are prepared to engage with them, then, you know, don't blame me if you turn around in 20 years' time and say, God bloody hell, it's all gone. Where did that go? Because it has already happened effectively with hunting, really, in Scotland. And it may well happen quite quickly in England as well. And the next target is definitely going to be shooting. You can see it in the proposals for licensing. And we had a foretaste of what licensing means last summer, 2023, when there was a real attempt to stop shoots close to environmentally protected areas to have the ability to put down birds. We've seen it with restrictions on larsen trapping, and year seemingly another species gets protected, another predator species. And it's all the chipping away is happening, and farming as well. I mean, we may well have restrictions on livestock farming and that sort of thing. So I wrote on Scribehounder to say, look, there is this battle going on. Our generation has a unique ability that has never happened before to engage with everybody on social media. If you tweet something and it's sufficiently interesting or thought-provoking, and you do it in such a way with hashtags and tagging in the key people and the rest of it, you can be pretty certain that the point you raised will be seen by members of the cabinet. That ability has never been there before. I mean, our generation has that ability, but the other side, the Monbios and the Packhams of this world, have been very clever at utilizing that, and they've mastered social media. They've all got thousands of followers, which amplify their voices. And we on our side have been really slow out of the blocks on this one. So I was saying, look, everybody must. Well, first of all, subscribe to Scribehounder, which is now where all the ideas are being debated, seems to me. But also, they need to get on social media. And my article was promptly disagreed with by Patrick Galbraith in a later argument, who believes that we shouldn't engage. But I really think that we've seen what's happened with hunting, and we don't want the same thing to happen to shooting. So it's very important that people get on there, even if it's just posting positive pictures of what they're doing for wildlife, laying hedges or whatever it is. Richard Negus is a good example of somebody who's always posting positive stuff on there, who's obviously also a keen shooting man, and much of what he does is working on shooting estates where people want their hedges to be laid for partridges and that sort of thing. So this is all positive stuff that needs to get out there. And if we don't brag about it and say this is what we're doing, and we wouldn't be doing it if we weren't also shooting, then the message isn't going to get across. And there are a lot of people who are sitting on the fence, who are pretty neutral journalists and broadcasters, and they need to be made aware of what's going on. And also we need to be able to refute a lot of the lies. There's a lot of false narratives out there that if they're not refuted, and Andrew Gilruth, I would single out somebody who's a real countryside hero, standing up for the moorland communities, defending grouse shooting and the management of moorland. Unless we get out there and sort of counter some of these false narratives, as he does, then don't be surprised if an incoming Labour government is very heavy-handed with the countryside and brings in all sorts of very unhelpful legislation that will really stop what we're doing.
Your piece got me thinking as well, Jamie, and a short while after I wrote something that was very much inspired by yours, and I think that there's two elements to this. One is the broadcast element of it, the broad scale social media element to it, where you're trying to talk to as many people as possible. And I feel very strongly that we all have an individual responsibility as also to try and increase the understanding of the people we meet who are not as part of our world on a sort of one-to-one basis. And I think that that's the other really important part of it is, start dishing out the pheasant, take people for a walk around the place, think about the way you engage with members of the public who are on footpaths on your place, that kind of thing, I think is super, super important. And if you can, Charlie Jacobi, I think it is, makes the point that most people are pretty ambivalent. They don't really feel that strongly one way or the other until they get asked. And then, if you've done a bit of groundwork there's a greater probability of them coming down on our side.
Yeah, because they normally get asked a sort of leading question.
Yeah.
And these polls are, normally pretty damaging, because polls are our weapon rather than a barometer. They're used by the other side the whole time and I suppose used sometimes by the Countryside Alliance really to try to.
Well, I mean, they're such rubbish, aren't they? Because a local village in West Wales can be campaigning on what it should do about its badges or something, and it would get like 30,000 people signing it, most of which live in deepest Australia. But the problem is it says 30,000 on it. And so they go, oh my God, our village really cares about this, despite there being only 500 residents. And so these polls aren't worth, 2 pennies, but some stupid people seem to be swayed by them, which is just beyond belief.
Yeah, because as you say, I think most people. I mean, we're in a high tourism area here. We have 7 holiday cottages here. We have a footpath running through the middle of the place, and I can really hardly think of any times when I've had any sort of negative comments about hunting or shooting. I mean, the hounds are exercised twice a day around the roads. So you've got people in cars coming past, you've got walkers, you've got people in the holiday cottages, so they're coming past their windows in the morning. And I've had lots of positive comments. So people saying how nice it is to see them. I can genuinely say I've never had anybody saying, you shouldn't be doing that.
It's so good to hear that.
And those are mostly people. I mean, most of our people, our holiday cottages, come from the big cities in the north of England, Manchester, Newcastle, and places like that. And I think, I mean, maybe it's a northern thing. I mean, maybe if I was down in the south of England, it might be slightly different. We don't get many. Some of our tourists come from the south of England, but most of them are from the north, probably. And likewise, but it's pretty obvious that we've got pheasants around. I mean, we obviously try not to be too sort of obvious about where we're putting pens or feeders or anything, but very little negativity. And yet, when you within the media, it's a sort of. It's almost as if it's a done deal that most people want this to stop. I mean, it's extraordinary, isn't it?
And I think that what you said actually is the truth. That's what the vast majority of the UK population doesn't care. They're ambivalent. They're open to being educated about, well, this is our way of life here and this is what happens. And they're quite happy with that. And I think that, as you say, the media sways it because the media model is broken. I mean, without wishing to get onto the business point, but that's one of the reasons we're so passionate about Scribehounder, because these guys have to produce sensationalist rubbish to get clicks to feed their business model. So in turn, they're responsible for increasing the anger amongst the country, because that's the only thing that makes their business work. I mean, it's an absolute travesty, but it's just something that really frustrates me. And I've noticed it more in the last year than ever. The quality of some of the content being put out by major news organizations it's journalism created off social media. Like, someone posted this and fans are up in arms after someone commented this. And it's like, that's not journalism. I mean, it's just taking the most outlandish stuff out there and saying this is the mood of the nation.
Wow, that's right. Bollocks. But I mean, that rather proves my point that if you're not on social media, and then it's just leaving the field open to them, because it's lazy journalism, but it does happen the whole time that even on the sort of 10 o'clock news, somebody will they will quote something somebody said on Twitter.
Yes, well,
but only to feed the model even more.
But I think we're coming to the end of a shooting season. It's January. The weather's been grim. I had no electricity one day last week and I had no water 2 days later. And, it can be a pretty bleak time of year. And some of this conversation could potentially sound a little bit on the negative side. But I think certainly last week, or was it even earlier this week, there was one very positive news story that was all over the papers. Former podcast guest Louisa Clutterbuck of Eat Wild getting venison and pheasant into nurseries and schools is incredibly positive, and some stadiums, at football stadiums and stuff as well. So that's a brilliant good news story.
Yeah.
And I think that there is light, and it's that sort of thing that will help to increase public understanding. And that understanding is so important, because it means that when there is the misinformation put out by the various people and organizations who we've mentioned already, then it's less likely to work. And it really does make a huge difference, that.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think you're right to have pointed that out, because it did get major coverage in the Times, didn't it? And it comes back to social license. If people are seeing game, it's more acceptable to then, well, obviously that game needs harvesting. So I understand that. That's social license. And so, getting people to try it, given that it's the end of the season and there's going to be a lot taken away of shoots over the next however long, just getting that into the mouths of those that might not have tried it before or only did once 10 years ago, that would be a really good thing to do.
Agreed.
Yeah, definitely.
Right, Jamie, the last part of this pod, the way we like to finish it off, is with desert island shooting. The situation is that the extinction level asteroid hits tomorrow. Your affairs are in order, your loved ones and enemies reconciled, your dogs are fed and your tomatoes have been watered. Your last day begins how?
Well, I really like shooting here. I think you're saying that maybe I should just get on a plane and go and shoot doves in Argentina or something. Which I probably would like to go and do once, maybe. But I just really like shooting here because I notice things. I notice things wherever I'm shooting, but it was a particular pleasure to me to shoot here because if a duck comes, I really have wild duck here, comes off a pond that I have dug and comes over and gets shot, which it did this year. That is this culmination of years of work getting that to happen, and the same with the snipe and pheasants coming out of woods that I have planted and all the rest of it. So I think I would like to perhaps spend my last day reflecting back on particularly with the link back to my childhood and everything. All my strong memories are here. There are. I'm very blessed, really. I shoot at lots of wonderful places, and this shoot is really Vauxhall League compared to something I talked about. I was shooting with my cousin John Blackett at Whitfield last weekend, and that is a fantastic shoot, isn't it? And they do things so well there, and there are many much better places to shoot than here. But I think that to me the shooting is the ultimate sort of fulfillment of years of conservation and planning and planting and digging ponds and creating wetlands and that sort of thing, and so. That would be my day.
What would that look like? How would it begin?
Well, I think hopefully I would have sort of close family and close friends here, many of whom have shot here for many years, and we would have a day. It might be rather difficult to get beaters if the world is about to end. So it probably have to be sort of walking and standing.
I don't think anyone's observed that point and realised that you might struggle to get beaters.
But it would be the kind of day that we normally have on Boxing Day with family and all the nephews and nieces shooting, and we wouldn't necessarily do the sort of big drives. Not that we have really going for big drives here, but we would do some of the wilder parts of the estate, the snipe bogs, and maybe try for a goose. It's very exciting if you can put 3,000 geese over a line of guns, driving them off a field.
That sounds amazing.
And I think we would go for definitely be a species day rather than trying for a big bag.
When was the last time you put 3,000 geese over a line of guns?
I haven't done it this year. I failed to do it this year, but last year I did it on my daughter's day, and they managed to get them so they came over, at a shootable height, which is very important. You don't want to wound them, and I think they got 2 or 3. So that's, and then we'd probably shoot into that. We would shoot into the dark. We'd have a duck flight, and also maybe have 3 people standing where they're close to the jackdaw roost and try and shoot some jackdaws as well, thin them out. Yeah, so that would be my ideal sort of day.
And actually, if you got in the Guns on Pegs private jet, you could go back 8 hours and then finish the day with some doves in Argentina.
Okay, that would be good. Yeah, and a sea trout.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, it's all possible. Lovely. Sounds like a cracking day.
It does sound like a good day. I'm still really interested in this. We need a volunteer to go back and listen to all the episodes and categorize all of the desert island shootings to pull out the trends for proper data. But there's definitely 2 camps, aren't there? Which is, I want to do what I always do with the people I always do it with, and I want to really pull out all the stops and do something mad.
Yeah, and whatever all of them do, there's a duck.
There's always
involved.
a duck. Always a duck.
Yeah.
which is very interesting.
Great. Well, Jamie, thank you ever so much for coming on. It's been great. Thank you for coming.
Thanks, guys, and keep up the good work.
Thank you. Cheers, Jamie. Thanks for coming.
Right, so before we go, all that remains for me to say is that there is a final reminder that you can get your hands on a pair of the very exclusive Guns on Pegs podcast shooting sock garters by sending us your shooting dilemmas for us to resolve, or by sending us your unpopular opinions, or by sharing your favourite drive names and the stories behind them. Drop us an email to pod@gunsonpegs.com, and if we read it out in the next episode or any future episode, we will send you some garters. We will be back in a couple of weeks' time with another episode, but until then, thanks very much for listening, and goodbye.